Her scream wasn't loud, but the silence, after it nearly killed me. I was standing in my kitchen, stirring my daughter's medication into her juice, when my phone buzzed, an alert from the smart sensor inside her medical bracelet. Heart rate spike. Possible distress. My blood froze. She was supposed to be in the backyard, playing with her therapy toys. But the signal was coming from inside someone else's house. Someone had moved her. And then I heard it, her weak, trembling knock echoing through my phone's audio feed. "Mom, it's dark. I can't get out." My breath left my body. I ran outside, only to see HOA, Karen's door slam shut, her blinds snapping closed like a trap. And in that moment, I realized something horrifying. My disabled daughter wasn't missing. She was locked inside Karen's house. And what happened next shocked this entire community. The moment I saw Karen's blinds slam shut, a chill crawled down my spine, the kind that warns you something is terribly, dangerously wrong. My daughter, Lily, my sweet 11-year-old girl who uses a leg brace since birth and struggles with sensory overwhelm, had never wandered anywhere alone. She physically couldn't. She always stayed within sight, always checked in, always held onto my arm when she felt uneasy. But today, something was different. Her medical bracelet's distress alert kept blinking, vibrating so hard it felt like it would crack through my palm. I ran toward Karen's porch, my heart pounding louder than my footsteps, remembering every complaint, every confrontation, every hostile stare she'd ever thrown at my daughter for being too slow, being too loud, or being too disabled. I banged on her door. Loud. Hard. But inside I heard nothing, no footsteps, no movement, just a faint, muffled whimper that sounded exactly like Lily trying to call my name through a wall. My stomach twisted. I screamed her name, my hands shaking as I tried to force the door open. It didn't budge. Neighbors peeked from windows, whispers starting to rise like smoke, nervous, confused, scared. I yelled for someone to call 911, but no one moved. That's when I remembered something that could either save my daughter or set this entire neighborhood on fire. I was done being quiet. And before the story begins, I want to ask you, yes, you watching this, which city are you seeing my video from? Comment your city below. And listen. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, because this story isn't just about an HOA feud. It's about a disabled girl's courage, a mother's breaking point, and a truth that shook our whole community to its core. Now, let's start the story from the exact moment everything went wrong. I still remember the way the air felt that afternoon. Heavy, tense, like the sky itself was warning me. Lily had been having a good day. One of her rare good days where her leg brace wasn't hurting and her anxiety wasn't spiking. She was coloring butterflies on the back porch while I prepared lunch, and every few seconds I'd peek out the window to see her smiling softly, lost in her own little world. She loved butterflies. She said they made her feel less different because even though one wing is smaller, the butterfly still flies. That sentence lived in my heart. But in just minutes, that peace shattered. Everything happened so fast, it didn't even feel real. I heard the backyard gate creak open. At first, I thought it was the wind, until I remembered the wind had been completely still that day. My stomach sank. Lily would never open that gate alone. Before I could step outside, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. Her medical bracelet alert flashing red. Distress location changed. My heart fell into my stomach as the GPS that moved across the yard into Karen's property, then inside her house. My pulse exploded. I sprinted outside, calling Lily's name, expecting to see her close by, maybe stuck, maybe scared. But she wasn't anywhere. Instead, I saw the back gate slightly open, as if someone had hurriedly pulled it shut behind them. And then my blood ran cold. I saw HOA, Karen on her porch, her eyes darting, her hand yanking her front door closed with unnatural speed, like she'd been caught doing something she wasn't supposed to. My body reacted before my mind did. I bolted toward her house, my lungs burning, shouting, "Where's my daughter? Karen, where is Lily?" But she ignored me, sprinting inside and slamming her door so hard it rattled frame. I didn't think. I pounded on her door with both fists, yelling loud enough for the entire street to hear. The neighbors started peeking outside, but no one stepped forward. Typical. They all knew how Karen was petty, power-hungry, always hiding behind HOA rules to bully families she didn't like. And she never liked us. She called Lily a disturbance, said the sound of her leg brace irritated her, complained about her therapy toys being visual clutter, once even threatened to fine us for having a medical ramp because it didn't match the neighborhood aesthetics. But locking my disabled daughter in her house, that was beyond anything even she could justify. My hands trembled as I pressed my ear to her door. And then I heard it. The softest, weakest, most heartbreaking little sound, a whimper. Lily's whimper. My baby was inside, crying. I felt my soul tear. I screamed for Karen again. Silence. I checked the windows, curtains drawn, lights off. The house looked dead, but I knew it wasn't. I tried the doorknob. It was locked. I pushed my shoulder into the door again and again, but it barely moved. Panic flooded my chest so violently, it made me dizzy. My daughter who panics in the dark. My daughter who can't open heavy doors because of her brace. My daughter locked somewhere inside a stranger's house. I yelled for someone to call 911, but the neighbors just stared like they were watching a drama unfold, not a child in danger. So I screamed at them, "Someone call right now." That force movement, one neighbor ran inside, but we all knew police wouldn't arrive in seconds. And seconds were all Lily had. That's when I remembered Lily's bracelet had an audio feed feature, something I had installed after her last panic episode. My hands shook as I opened the app. A click, static, and then her voice. "Mommy, it's dark, please help." I swear my heart physically cracked inside my chest. That moment changed me. Something primal woke inside me. Something fierce, something unstoppable. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a mother whose disabled child was trapped. And nothing, no door, no HOA rule, no neighbor silence was going to keep me from getting her. I took 3 steps back, braced myself, and slammed my shoulder into Karen's door with every ounce of strength I had, while the entire neighborhood watched in terrified silence. And that was the moment everything truly began to unravel. The impact of my shoulder against Karen's door sent a jolt of pain shooting down my arm, but I didn't stop, not for a second, because Lily's muffled sobs inside that house were louder than any physical pain I could feel. My breaths came out broken, desperate, each one fueled by a mixture of terror and rage I had never tasted before. As I pulled back to slam into the door again, Karen's voice suddenly erupted from inside, sharp, furious, unhinged. "Stop that. You're damaging my property." Property, that was the word she used while my disabled daughter was locked somewhere inside her home, terrified and alone. I shouted her name, demanded she open the door, but she only shrieked something unintelligible from deeper inside, her voice echoing like someone running between rooms. I slammed again. This time the doorframe cracked, but before I could hit it again, Karen swung it open so fast I stumbled forward. She stood there, out of breath, her face twisted into a mask of fake outrage as she thrust her finger inches from my face. "You can't break into my house. I'll call the HOA on you," she snapped, as if the HOA, her beloved shield, was more powerful than the law itself. I pushed past her so hard she stumbled back, shouting, "Where is my daughter?" She screamed at me to get out, but I didn't care. I stormed through her living room, scanning every corner, my heart beating so hard I could hear it in my ears. And then I heard the sound 3 soft knocks coming from behind a hallway door. My thighs nearly gave out. I ran. The hallway felt longer than it should have been, like the world was stretching just to test me. Karen lunged after me, grabbing my arm, but I ripped away from her grip, so violently she fell onto the wall. Her roar echoed through the hall, but I was already at the door. I tried the knob, locked. Again, always locked. I pressed my ear to the door. "Mommy?" Her voice, trembling, strained, barely above a whisper. That single word burned itself into my spine. "Lily baby, I'm right here." I tried to keep my voice steady, but it cracked anyway. I yanked at the doorknob, shoved my shoulder against it, kicked it with my heel, but it didn't budge. Karen came stumbling toward us, panting like a cornered animal. "You can't go in there. That room is OFF limits." "Off limits?" My vision blurred red. "You locked a disabled child inside your house." I screamed so loud the floor itself seemed to shake. She snapped back with the same soulless arrogance she used at every HOA meeting. She was trespassing. I was teaching her a lesson. She should have stayed in her yard. A lesson. She called this a lesson. My daughter, who couldn't run. My daughter, who panicked in enclosed spaces. My daughter, who trusted people too easily. Something inside me tore. I slammed the door again, and it cracked near the lock. Karen grabbed my arm again, shrieking that I would pay for this, but suddenly the living room door burst open. 2 neighbors rushed in. Not to help me. No, to grab me off. Poor Karen, the iron-fisted queen of the HOA. They latched onto my arms, pulling me back, yelling for me to calm down. Calm? Calm while Lily was trapped? Calm while Karen justified locking her up like a punishment? I kicked, screamed, ripped my arm away, and darted for the hallway again, but Karen beat me to it. She stood in front of the door like a guard dog, arms stretched, panting, as if she were the hero of this story. "She's fine," Karen yelled. "She just needs to learn boundaries." I swear I felt my blood turn to fire. I shoved her aside with enough force to send her stumbling backward, and I lifted my foot, slammed my heel into the door's weak point, and the lock snapped, with splintering as the door crashed open. For a moment, everything stopped. The neighbors froze. Karen gasped, and I saw my daughter, curled in the corner of the room, sitting on the floor with her leg brace twisted awkwardly, her hands covering her ears, tears streaking down her cheeks, her whole body shaking uncontrollably. The room was dark except for a small lamp in the corner, and the air was cold like no heat had been allowed in. She looked like she hadn't moved in minutes, trapped in paralyzing fear. "Mommy," her voice cracked as she tried to crawl toward me, but her brace snagged against the doorframe. I dropped to my knees, scooped her into my arms, and felt her cling to my shirt so tightly I could barely breathe. She kept repeating, "I couldn't get out. I couldn't get out," as her small fingers dug into my back. Rage, relief, and heartbreak collided inside me. I kissed the top of her head, whispering that she was safe, but Lily flinched violently when Karen screamed behind us. "You broke my door. You're paying for that." And I'm pressing HOA violations. And that her priorities, her cruelty, her lack of remorse was the moment the entire neighborhood finally realized something. Karen wasn't just strict. She wasn't just mean. She was dangerous. But they didn't know the worst part yet. Not even close. The moment I lifted Lily into my arms and stepped out of that suffocating dark room, the entire hallway felt like it was holding its breath. My daughter's small fingers were still digging into my shirt, trembling so violently it felt like she was trying to crawl inside my chest just to feel safe. Her breathing came in sharp, panicked bursts. Her leg brace twisted awkwardly from how she'd tried to force her way toward the door. I adjusted her gently, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here," but she flinched every time Karen's voice so much as echoed down the hallway. And Karen, God, she was pacing, screaming, ranting, waving her arms like the victim, yelling at the neighbors about property damage, broken rules, HOA reports, trespassing violations, and how I should be arrested for breaking into her home, as if my child hadn't been locked inside. Her voice rose so sharply it felt like glass cutting through the air. What shocked me wasn't her hysteria, it was how the neighbors froze, paralyzed, unsure of which side to take. They had seen her bullying for years, had watched her target vulnerable families, criticize disabled kids, demand fines nobody deserved, yet they never interfered. She held power here, the kind of power that crawled into people's backs and made them bow. But now, with Lily crying in my arms, mascara smudged across her cheeks from tears, her brace digging into her skin, something in the air shifted. The neighbors exchanged glances, confused, guilty, horrified, and for the first time, Karen's dominance flickered. I carried Lily slowly into the living room, needing space to breathe, and that's when the whispers started, low at first, then louder. I saw Karen dragging her. She slammed the door on the kid. She always hated that family. Some neighbors stepped in shyly, trying to act concerned now that the truth was leaking out. One elderly woman touched my arm, timidly, asking if Lily needed water. Another tried to help straighten her brace. Someone suggested calling an ambulance, but that suggestion turned the crowd stiff, because we all knew what that meant: police involvement. Karen screeched at the top of her lungs, "Don't you dare call anyone. This is my property. I did nothing wrong. That girl is dramatic. She just got scared." Dramatic. She called my daughter dramatic, as if Lily had locked herself in that room and curled into a shaking ball for fun. I placed my hand over Lily's ear as Karen ranted, trying to shield her from the venom. But Karen wasn't yelling at Lily. She was yelling at everyone, trying to control the narrative like she always did. One man, Mr. Hendricks, who usually loved siding with Karen in HOA meetings, stepped forward and asked her bluntly, why was the door locked? Karen's face twitched. Because she invaded my home. I was teaching her to stay out. She snapped, but her voice cracked just enough to expose her lie. Another neighbor followed with, why was she alone? In the dark. That question was a spear. Karen had no answer. She stuttered, shifted her feet, tried to blame me, blame Lily, blame everyone but herself. And the more she tried, the more the crowd leaned away from her, physically, emotionally, morally. Suddenly, Lily whimpered softly into my shoulder. Mommy, she pushed me. The words were barely audible, but the silence that followed was louder than any scream. Every neighbor turned their eyes toward Karen. Even Karen froze, not because she felt guilt, but because the truth was slipping out of her control. A teen girl next door stepped forward and said she heard yelling earlier. Then a father mentioned seeing Karen storming across the yards. Then someone else said they heard a loud thud. Little puzzle pieces of a horrible picture were falling into place. Karen's face went ghost white, then beet red. Then she exploded again. She is lying. That child is lying. She always wants attention. I swear something inside me snapped like a bone. I stepped forward, still holding Lily, and said calmly, ice cold, deadly steady, say one more word about my daughter. Karen tried to stare me down, but for the first time since I had moved into this neighborhood, she looked scared. Maybe it was the way the neighbors were no longer standing behind her. Maybe it was the way Lily clung to me, the image so undeniably heartbreaking no one could ignore it anymore. Or maybe it was because she could see something in my eyes she had never seen before, a mother who wasn't going to be bullied, silenced, threatened, or controlled. Then came the moment that shifted everything. A neighbor in the back said, quietly, I called the police. Karen spun around, unhinged. How dare you? This is an HOA matter. I handle everything here. But her voice was trembling now, cracking like thin ice. People stepped away from her, forming a loose circle around me and Lily instead. Karen's isolation became visible, physical. My daughter suddenly whispered, Mommy, she said nobody would hear me. She buried her face in my neck, and I felt rage coil around my ribs like barbed wire. The neighbors heard her. The air went cold. Karen finally realized she wasn't the center anymore. She wasn't the authority. She wasn't the queen of anything. She was surrounded, exposed, shrinking. In that stillness, sirens began to echo from the end of the street. And that was the moment the neighborhood finally understood. This wasn't an HOA issue. This was a crime. And Karen's downfall had only just begun. The moment the faint wail of sirens drifted down the street, the entire neighborhood shifted from tense silence to a trembling kind of anticipation, like everyone was finally realizing they were witnessing something far bigger than an HOA argument. Karen froze in the center of her living room, her hands shaking, her face twisted into the same hateful snarl she always used to intimidate people during meetings, but this time, no one was intimidated. Her voice had lost its weight. Her posture had lost its command. She was shrinking by the second, losing her power with every approaching echo of those sirens. I held Lily tighter, feeling her heartbeat racing against my chest, her small fingers gripping my shoulder like she was afraid the room would swallow her again. I whispered, "It's okay, baby. It's almost over. I promise." But deep down, a storm of fear and rage swirled inside me because I didn't know what the police would walk into. Karen was manipulative, cunning, practiced in twisting the truth. HOA presidents like her, people with authority connections and a talent for lies, knew exactly how to spin a story. I braced myself, knowing she'd do anything to make herself look innocent. And she did. The second the patrol car stopped in front of the house, Karen ran toward the door, forcing herself into crocodile tears so dramatic they looked like a bad audition. "Officers, thank God you're here," she cried, waving her arms. She assaulted me. She broke into my home. She's dangerous. She needs to be removed immediately." She pointed at me like I was some feral criminal. The officers held up their hands, calmly asking her to step back, but Karen only grew louder, her words desperate, tangled, frantic. The neighbors immediately stepped forward, speaking over her, something that in all the years we'd lived here, I had never seen them do. Mrs. Village, the elderly woman from across the street, said firmly, "Her daughter was locked in your house, Karen." We all heard the child crying. Then Mr. Hendricks chimed in, reluctantly but with conviction. The room was locked. She broke the door because the child was trapped. Someone else added they'd heard Lily screaming earlier. Another said they saw Karen dragging her. Suddenly, the officer's attention shifted from Karen's theatrics to Lily's trembling form in my arms. One officer crouched down, his voice gentle, asking Lily her name and if she was hurt. Lily buried her face in my neck and whispered, "She locked me in the dark." Her voice cracked on the last word. The officer's expression hardened instantly. Karen lunged between us. "That's not true. She's a dramatic child." She wandered in. I was helping. She needed discipline. The officer cut her off. "Ma'am, please step aside." That sentence, the one Karen wasn't used to hearing, made her face collapse. I stood taller, adjusting Lily's brace and holding her as the officers began documenting everything. They photographed the damaged door. They noted the scratches on Lily's arms and the redness on her wrists where she had clawed at the locked handle. They asked neighbors for statements. And I watched Karen's desperation grow into panic, then into fury, then into something even uglier, fear of consequences she had never imagined would apply to her. One officer gently asked me to recount what happened. I explained everything, how Lily's medical bracelet alerted me, how I followed the GPS, how Karen slammed her door, how my daughter was found crying in a dark room with the door locked. Throughout my recounting, Karen kept shouting contradictions, each one wilder than the last. "She's lying. They're all lying. They're jealous of me. She's setting me up." Her voice shrilled so loudly the officer finally told her if she didn't calm down, she would be detained for obstruction. That shut her up for a moment. Then came the part no one expected. The officer asked Karen, "Do you have any reason to detain this child? Any permission from her parent? Any emergency situation?" Karen blinked rapidly, stuttering, "Well, I thought she was in my yard. She trespassed. I was teaching her boundaries." The officer stared at her like she'd spoken another language. "You locked a disabled minor in a room to teach her boundaries?" Karen swallowed, looking around at the neighbors for support, but no one stood with her. "Not this time. Not ever again." Before she could spit out another excuse, a soft voice near the doorway broke the atmosphere. "Mommy," it was Lily lifting her head slightly, tears streaking her cheeks. She said no one would hear me. She said I was a problem. My heart twisted painfully, but the officers, their eyes filled with something sharp and cold. Karen's face drained of color. She tried to interrupt, but the officer raised a hand. "Ma'am, you need to step outside while we speak with the parent and child." Karen exploded. "This is my HOA community. I make the rules here." "That's not how the law works," the officer said. For the first time since we'd moved into this neighborhood, Karen was powerless. She was escorted outside for questioning while I was taken to the living room couch, where Lily finally loosened her grip enough to breathe. The neighbors gathered around, not close enough to overwhelm Lily, but close enough to show support. Some apologized for not speaking up sooner. Others looked ashamed. The weight of their silence over the years was visible in their eyes. Inside that living room, something had begun. Something Karen couldn't stop. Something the neighborhood needed. An official investigation. And they hadn't even seen the worst evidence yet. Not the scratches. Not the bruises. Not the thing Karen left behind in that locked room. The thing that would change everything. As the officers stepped outside with Karen for formal questioning, the living room finally grew quiet, except for Lily's shaky breaths against my chest. I rubbed her back gently, trying to steady her, but inside me a storm raged so violently I felt like my own ribs could crack from holding it in. The neighbors lingered nearby, unsure if they should leave or stay, restless with guilt, fear, and shock. But the officers weren't done. They still needed to finish searching the house, documenting the room where Lily had been trapped. One officer motioned for another to join him as they headed down the hallway, flashlights cutting through the dimness in Karen's home. I stayed on the couch with Lily while the adult neighbors spoke quietly amongst themselves, but their whispers died when a sudden voice echoed sharply from the back of the house. Sarge? You need to see this." Something in his tone, tight, disturbed, made my stomach drop. The officer who had been talking to me glanced back with a concerned frown and excused himself before heading down the hall. The neighbor stiffened. Even Lily lifted her head slightly, anxiety flickering through her trembling fingers. I kissed her forehead, whispering that everything was okay, though in truth I didn't know what they had found. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours until the officer finally emerged, his expression far more serious than before. He exchanged a look with the other officer, one of those silent conversations police officers have when they've discovered something deeply wrong. Then he turned to me. "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm," he said in a low voice. My heart thudded painfully. "What did you find?" He hesitated, glancing at Lily, then back at me. "We found multiple items in the room that concern us." His words were careful, controlled, but the weight behind them was crushing. He continued, "First, the door lock, it's been altered, reinforced. It locks from the outside, but not the inside." Something inside me twisted violently. That wasn't just a storage room. That was a holding room. The officer went on. "Second, there are scratches on the inside of the door, fresh scratches." My blood froze. Lily let out a tiny whimper and buried her face in my shoulder again. The officer's jaw tightened. "There's also a chair in the corner with restraints." I nearly dropped my daughter. The neighbors gasped. Restraints. Restraints in a locked room, where my disabled daughter was trapped, my vision blurred, and I had to grip the couch just to stay upright. Are you saying she uses that room on people?" The officer didn't answer directly. "We don't know yet, but this setup is not normal, not legal, and not accidental." Another neighbor burst into tears. Someone else whispered, horrified, "Oh my God, she's been doing this to animals? Kids? Who knows?" My skin crawled. My breath stopped. All this time, all those moments, Karen seemed too comfortable threatening people, too confident, too unafraid of consequences, suddenly made sense in the worst possible way. The officer then added the part that shattered every last piece of calm I was pretending to have. "There's also a camera." A cold shiver raced down my spine. "A camera?" He nodded grimly, facing the chair, and the room, and the door. Karen hadn't just locked my child in a room. She had filmed it. My knees buckled. I clutched Lily tighter, my mind spiraling. The officer explained they had already disconnected the device and secured the memory card. "We'll need to review the footage with detectives. This could be much bigger than just today's incident." Bigger? How could anything be bigger than what she'd already done? I couldn't breathe. The room felt smaller, tighter, darker, like the walls were closing in with the realization that my child had been trapped in something designed for control, surveillance, punishment. The neighbors were horrified. One of them, Mr. Johnson, shouted toward the open doorway where Karen was being questioned, "You're sick. You're absolutely sick." Karen tried to scream back, but her voice got swallowed by officers demanding she remain calm. The crowd outside grew louder, angrier, bolder, now that the truth was unfolding uncontrollably. The officer knelt slightly in front of me, lowering his voice, so only I could hear. When we opened the camera, we saw the indicator light. It was on, which meant Karen had been watching Lily, watching her cry, watching her panic, watching her suffer. And she didn't stop it. She recorded it. My body went cold with a rage, so deep I felt it in my teeth. I whispered, "She is never coming near my daughter again." The officer replied, "She won't. I promise you." Outside, another patrol car arrived, this time with detectives. Karen's shouting turned shrill, desperate, animalistic. She knew what they'd found. She knew what was coming. The officer who had been speaking to me nodded solemnly and said, "Ma'am, this is no longer just a child endangerment case. This is potentially a criminal confinement case, maybe worse. We're taking her into custody." A wave of emotion, relief, fury, grief crashed into my chest. Tears blurred my vision. I held Lily closer, feeling her tiny heartbeat against mine. From outside, a loud shout erupted. "Karen, you're under arrest." The neighborhood fell completely silent, and that silence was the sound of justice beginning. The moment the detectives stepped forward and the cold click of handcuffs echoed across the yard, something inside me finally exhaled, something I had been holding in ever since Lily's bracelet sent that first distress alert. I carried her outside, still shaking, still clinging to me as if letting go would return her to the darkness she'd been trapped in. The neighbors gathered on their porches and lawns, forming a silent corridor as Karen was let out in cuffs, her face twisted in panic, disbelief, and furious denial. She thrashed, screaming, "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. I run this neighborhood. You're making a mistake." But for once in her life, nobody listened, not the neighbors she used to intimidate, not the officers she tried to bully, not the world she thought revolved around her. The detectives were stone-faced, already holding the camera, the memory card, and photographs of the reinforced door and restraints. Evidence she couldn't HOA her way out of. Evidence no charm or manipulation or fake tears could erase. When she saw the camera in their hands, something in her snapped. She lunged at the detective, shrieking, "Give that back. That's mine." It only earned her more charges. The neighbors recoiled as she was pushed into the patrol car, still screaming, still fighting, but shrinking into nothing the moment that door slammed shut. I looked down at Lily, brushing the hair from her face. She was exhausted, her eyes swollen from crying, her body limp from fear and adrenaline. An EMT approached, asking gently if he could check her vitals. Lily clutched my shirt tighter, whispering, "Don't leave me. I promised her I wouldn't." I stayed by her side through every check, blood pressure, pulse, oxygen levels. Her numbers were unstable, her muscles trembling from the panic attack. She'd been trapped inside for too long. The EMT's expression softened with both sympathy and fury. "She's traumatized. No child should have been in that room," he murmured. I nodded, but my throat tightened until it hurt. Watching her small fingers tremble as she held onto my wrist nearly shattered me. The detectives returned, asking if I was ready to give a full statement. I told them I would, but not until Lily felt a little safer. So they waited with patience and professionalism while the EMT wrapped a warm blanket around her shoulders. The neighbors approached in slow, hesitant steps, offering water, offering support, offering apologies they should have spoken years ago. Some cried, some whispered that they wished they had stepped in sooner, and some admitted they had always been afraid of Karen's retaliation. But today, finally, they understood the cost of silence. Once Lily had calmed enough to breathe steadily, the detectives and I sat at a patio table. Lily stayed on my lap, wrapped in her blanket, her head tucked beneath my chin. I recounted everything from the moment her alert pinged to the second officers broke open the locked room. I explained Karen's history of harassment, her obsession with rules, her hostility toward disabled children, her constant targeting of our family, and her escalating behavior over the past few months. Detective Morales, the lead investigator, listened with a seriousness that made my skin prickle. When I finished, he said, quietly, "Based on what we found, this case will move forward fast. The evidence is overwhelming." Overwhelming. That word felt like both closure and a blade. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in a fading orange, the patrol cars pulled away. One carrying Karen, defeated and screaming, the other transporting the evidence that would seal her fate. The neighborhood buzzed in a low hum of disbelief. People spoke to each other in hushed tones. "I can't believe she did that. I always knew she was controlling, but this is evil. What if there were other victims?" The questions weighed heavy. Even I wondered, how many times had she used that room? How many children had she scared? How many animals had she punished? How many families had she intimidated into silence? But those questions would be answered by the detectives. My priority was Lily. I held her close as we walked back into our home, a place that had never felt so sacred. She finally loosened her grip enough to let me sit her on the couch. She looked around as if expecting the room to darken, expecting a door to lock. I turned on every light in the house, sat beside her, and let her rest her head in my lap. For the first time all day, she whispered, "Mommy, am I safe now?" My voice cracked as I answered, "Yes, baby, you're safe. She can't hurt you again." And I meant it, because Karen wouldn't be seeing daylight without bars for a very long time. The next morning, the detectives called with an update. Karen had been charged with child endangerment, unlawful confinement, attempted coercion, and obstruction, but more charges were pending after they began reviewing the footage. The footage she tried to hide. The footage that would expose everything. Justice had begun, and this time, nothing could stop it. If you're still here, if you felt even a fraction of what my daughter went through, then I want to speak directly to you. No child, disabled or not, should ever fear being unheard. No parent should ever feel helpless while someone with a tiny piece of authority abuses it like a weapon. What happened to Lily can happen anywhere, in any neighborhood, behind any closed door. And sometimes the only thing that shines light into that darkness is people like you speaking up. So tell me in the comments which city you're watching from, and let me know, do you believe justice was finally served? Your voice matters. Your story matters. And together, we protect the children who can't protect themselves. Before you scroll away, please hit that subscribe button because these real-life stories deserve to be heard, and your support helps us bring truth, courage, and justice into the light. Stay safe, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next story.